Now, time now to take you through the morning papers with the UK editor of The Big Issue, Paul McNamee, and the former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson. Welcome back to both of you. Hope you've got a few presents wrapped between now and when I last spoke to you, last hour. Good work. So let's kick off. We've looked at some of the front pages in the last hour. This hour, we're delving inside, aren't we, Dawn? And you've picked out a story inside today's Daily Mail, which is reflecting on how the Border Force strike went yesterday at those airports where workers walked out.
Absolutely, you've been covering it this morning, Anna. That it's a strike advent calendar, isn't it? Every day there's several strikes going on. This is the Border Force one, where 1,000 passport staff have walked out of Gatwick, Heathrow, Birmingham, Cardiff, Glasgow, and Manchester. And as is always these days, our wonderful armed forces were brought in to help out. And incredibly, the airports are working more efficiently than they normally do. And lots of people have been putting on social media about they were expecting hell getting through the airports, but it was much more efficient and quicker than usual. And 250,000 travellers are estimated at the affected airports today, I think, alone. And every day there's going to be disruption now by Border Force until the end of the year, with the exception of the 27th of December. Not quite sure what's happening there. But, you had a brilliant interview just now, Anna, with those two lovely officers out in Bahrain. And I just want to wish everyone serving in our armed forces personnel a very Merry Christmas, because they work incredibly hard. They've been roped in to cover most of the strikes. Many of them are very poorly paid themselves. They work selflessly. They're not allowed to strike by law, obviously. And they do so much for us. And, they're covering jobs where people are better paid than they are. So fair play to everyone who is working this Christmas, filling the gaps that the strikes have caused. But it's obviously not just the airports, Anna. It's planes, trains, automobiles. The only thing I think might be making it through, Anna, are the Ranger. I think they're quite safe.
Yeah, I'm not worried about them. I feel very confident, after my many Christmases. So far, so good on that score. Let's keep with the subject of strikes, shall we, Paul? Because you wanted to talk about The Guardian's article inside its paper, really reflecting on this kind of stalemate between the unions and ministers. Neither side appear to be budging. How's The Guardian covering this?
Well, when you say neither side appear to be budging, I mean, Mick Lynch, who's clearly the most prominent of the union leaders of the men and women representing their members, he has repeatedly said he's ready to talk to government to try and bring an end to the real strikes. But he has said here that the government ministers have gone missing, which is making the situation worse. And he is not alone. And I think what this story gets to, because there's so many unions involved, as Dawn has mentioned, whether it's the GMB, the RCN, PCS, who are looking after the Border Force, there appears to be an ideological battle going on now between government, who, whether it's because they don't want to or they can't negotiate, they don't have the wherewithal or the people in government because of all the chaos that there's been around government, they don't want to engage, and unions who want to represent so many thousands of people. This isn't just one or two. This isn't just a couple of people asking for a pay rise. It's about the future of service across Britain for all of us for a number of years. And when we have these two forces butting together, it leaves the rest of us stuck. The trains are going to stop at 3 today. There's problems at the airport, and while Dawn says that the army have stepped in and helped, that's fine, but that is hardly a long-term solution. So we have this position, and I think it is incumbent on the government to lead. And at present, they are simply not leading, and they are allowing us to blame those who they claim are being offered all sorts of perks and extra money. And there's no end in sight. Everything suggests that it could get worse in January. I don't want to spoil Christmas, but that is the reality that we're facing.
Yeah, and Paul, very briefly then, what do you make of the government saying we haven't got very much money and we're worried that any pay rises that match inflation or go beyond matching inflation are inflationary themselves, and that will affect everybody? What do you make of that then?
Well, there are already some unions. The GMB have said, well, come to us. If you make an offer that is not quite at inflation, we will talk about it. So there are unions who are saying, if that is the case, come to us. But also it's wider than that. It's terms and conditions. It's not just money in the moment. It's how people can live in the future.
OK, well, as you say, we've just got to sit back and see what happens on this, haven't we, with all those strikes, as you say, across the calendar for the time being. Let's move on to the front page of the Daily Mail, shall we, Dawn? You wanted to talk about their headline there. NHS, they say, wasting millions on woke non-jobs.
This is the perfect Daily Mail headline, isn't it, Anna? They have done an investigation into how much money is wasted, in inverted commas, by the NHS on non-medical jobs. This includes jobs like our diversity officers, a director of lived experience. I'm not entirely sure what that is, but they are being paid £115,000 a year, while nursing staff, as we know, are taking industrial action. And I think the ones, as Paul was discussing, there's many of them, but I think the one strike that really does have public support is the NHS, the nursing staff being on strike. But nursing entry level can be as low as £23,000, and you've got a director of lived experience again on 115, and the Mail have investigated, and it's like £40 million a year on 112 equality, diversity and inclusion. That's enough, Anna, for 1,200 nurses or 1.3 million GP appointments. Now, 7.2 million people are currently on the NHS waiting list. That's not a situation that's going to improve. And as Paul was saying earlier on, it's like what everyone now wants is just talk to one another, just get round the negotiating table. The government is saying one thing, the unions are saying another. Meanwhile, everybody out here is going, please, just can we sort the situation out? It's not going to get any better. And as Paul somewhat depressingly alluded to, the new year doesn't look too much, too better either, does it?
OK, let's move on to the next one. Paul, you have picked out a story in the Express about banks shutting down.
I feel I'm a merchant of doom here with every story I'm looking at. Yeah, this is a story that the Express have picked up from Which, and they've run some numbers. Over the last 8 years, 5,000 bank branches have closed across Britain, and there's another 200 bank branches and building societies that look like they're going to shut next year. And it's a warning, really, because there are still people who rely on cash. There's an awful lot of industry, an awful lot of work that is cash business. I work among big issue vendors, although half of them now accept cashless payments, and we're trying to help get more to do that. An awful lot of our vendors do rely on cash. So I know right at the front line how cash is important to people. And as we move away from it, and there is the rush, we know so many shops and pubs and other businesses that only accept cards. The marginalised people are going to be shut out of society further, which is not a good and positive thing. So this really is just a warning from Which to say, look, hold on. We need to think and consider other people and what we can do about it. The other side of it, of course, is the high street. As these places are hollowed out and there's less reason for people maybe to go to the high street, it makes it more difficult for high streets, which are suffering desperately, to come back. And I'll stop now because everything I say seems to be about a bleak future. I'm sure there are some positive things.
I'm sure there are some positive things. There's just one word on my list here, Dawn, for the next thing, and it's champagne. That sounds pretty positive. To explain the story, it's inside the Telegraph, isn't it? We haven't got very long. I have to do it quite briefly, I'm afraid.
Champagne. Okay. So this is the French getting somewhat snobby about the sparkling wine industry in the UK. Some champagne houses have brought up parts of the southeast, saying the soil is now good for producing champagne grapes, so we can start our own champagne industry. But the big boss of Moet, Aberve and Dom Perignon, I can pronounce these names, has said, no, it's not happening, your soil isn't good enough, and the only place to produce decent champagne is France. There you go.
So it wasn't that positive, really, was it? Anyway, made us all think a little bit about champagne.
I'm trying.
You are trying. We've got another go to find a few Christmassy stories as well, but thanks very much indeed for the moment. I'll see you in the next hour. And we've got all the top stories coming up next, of course, here on Sky News Breakfast, so don't go away.